All right, welcome back, everybody. I appreciate the patience. Hopefully we were a little bit ahead of schedule, so all the technical problems could be fixed. I'd like to welcome Waldo Jaquith here. He is the web developer for the Business Center at the University of Virginia, and he will be talking to us today about his project, State Decoded, and also relying on open source access to information. That's all.
This ugly thing that you're seeing here, this is actually what the, I think this is as Alabama's Open Meetings Act, as it looks on their website. I'm not cropping anything out. This is everything that's in the browser. Nowhere does it say Alabama or laws. There's no navigation, no concept of where you are, how you got there, whether this is official information, nothing. This is Louisiana's. Scarcely any better. You can see at the top there's a little bit of navigation, previous, next, print, close this window. You often see this in online text, legal text displays, this concept that it's a book that you might read from beginning to end. And the most important thing is next and previous. This is Georgia. At first glance, this might look better. It's actually just as bad with some chrome around the edges. Georgia punted and decided they have no interest whatsoever in putting their laws online, and they would have LexisNexis do it. And once you ignore their footer and their relatively useless header, there's no more information here. I mean, at least it says Georgia code. That's a very small step in the right direction, but we're really reaching to complement this sort of thing. This is Virginia's same law, open meeting notice. There's previous and next, they got that. And if we really want to reach, we can complement the fact that they have linked cross-references. Yay! There is, in fact, though, there's a lot of useful information in here, should somebody care to take the time to extract it. That's where I come in. For instance, I mean, we have here the catch line of this section. We have the citation for it. And every cross-reference, including the reference to Title 54.1, that's meaningful metadata, where we can say, we can see how this law is related to other laws. But there's a lot more in here, such as every word that is defined somewhere in the code. That's really useful, because not only does that allow us to understand which words here have specific definitions, but some of these might also have specific legal definitions outside of the code, or might be defined multiple times in the code. The words that are used in there, we can see perhaps which of those words are defined in other laws, and use that to see how these laws are related. Some powerful information is present in these laws if you care to take the time to extract it. This is the next page, you know, if you were to page down on that law. And you can see at the footer here, there's this cryptic-looking information in parentheses at the bottom. And let's zoom in so that you can look at it exactly, see what this is. This probably means something to almost all of you. To the general public, this is gobbledygook. This is garbage. It means nothing to anybody. At one point, when we were printing laws and the printed page was the primary way that people found legal information, this was a perfectly sensible way to compact down information about how a law came to be and when it was amended. We're not really having an electron shortage that I'm aware of. And so the idea that on screen we should persist with this useless display is just crazy. It's very useful information. It would be trivial to expand to tell people exactly what it really means. This often gets a laugh with audiences like this. This is, and I want to read this out loud so we can all appreciate how ridiculous that this is. This is actual text from the homepage of the website for Kansas's regulations. This is their instructions about how to use this site. To find the latest version of a regulation online, a person should first check the table of contents in the most current Kansas register, then the index to regulations in the most current Kansas register, then the current KAR supplement, then the Kansas Administrative Regulations. If the regulation is found at any of these sequential steps, stop and consider that version the most recent. No, Kansas, you stop. This is terrible. All of that information is on the website. All of it could be connected. You should be able to look at a regulation and immediately see the current version and proposed changes and comments that people have made on it and proposed changes that didn't get through before. And the history of modifications that accreted to make this current regulation. No. Instead, they place that burden on the person visiting the website. That's crazy. What we need is a humane code display. And so there's 4 standards that I like to put behind this about what it means to display legal text online in a way that is humane. The first is to remember something that is particularly hard for y'all and becoming increasingly hard for me, is to remember what it was like to be a beginner. What it was the first time you cracked open a legal text when you needed to know something that was important, and thinking, I am screwed. I mean, this is why the profession of attorneys continues to flourish. And I think this is part of why we're seeing it begin to crumble over the past few years, as we see the bigger firms start to downsize and lay people off, and the era of the $1,000 billable hour simultaneously giving away to new law school grads saying maybe there are new ways that we can establish law firms. Is that we're seeing the advent of services that make it easier for people to provide help for themselves or to get low-dollar legal help. And a lot of these services understand what it's like to be a beginner. They understand that you don't actually need to pay somebody $400 an hour for basic contact advice, when maybe they just need to go to nolo.com and read a little bit. Or go to their friendly local law library and say, can you tell me where to look? So, it is incredibly important for anybody in the practice of providing legal data to be able to remember what it was like to be new, and to make it easy to understand. I took a lot of notes when I first got into this. It's only been 4 years or so since I got heavily into trying to make legal codes easier for people to understand. But I still find myself slipping. So I go back and read those notes to see the things that frustrated me, because it's easy to forget. The second point is that legal codes, legal texts of all sorts are just words. We know how to make words beautiful. This is not like a new concept that maybe legal texts don't have to be base. Do yourself a favor and crack open any Lexis published, and I haven't checked this specifically with West, so I can't knock them, any Lexis published state legal code, Virginia's in particular. Look at the table of contents. It is hideous. Microsoft Word can trivially produce an easier to navigate table of contents than the disgusting thing that they have tossed up on the page there, showing no respect whatsoever, not only for the general public, but for an attorney who would just like to run their finger down the page and find the appropriate chapter or section to look for. So look at illuminated Bibles from 1,500 years ago. Monks with no education whatsoever other than how to read Latin knew how to make words beautiful and easy to read. They know that the measure, the width of the text, can't exceed a certain amount. We generally say 70, 75 characters. This is wide as legal text can be in line, or any text, on the page, before it becomes like a tennis match, trying to go back and forth to figure out at the end of the line which one you have to go back to start on again. We understand things like leading, how much space there should be between each line to make it easy to read. That typeface makes a huge difference in comprehension. There are several papers that have been published in the past decades studying the impact of typeface on people's ability to understand legal text, and it is huge. There's a really non-trivial difference. And the failure to take advantage of that, I think, is a significant reason of why people have a difficult time understanding this. It looks, you just crack open many legal texts, they look intimidating. And I think that's part of the shtick, that's part of the value, is it looks serious. Why do so many high-powered attorneys line the walls of their office with leather-bound legal texts that they never open? They have staff who looks at these things, and for that matter, they look it up online now anyway. It's the presentation of legal texts so often is about looking important more so than being understandable or easy to read. The third point, the importance of representing the interconnectedness of rules. Laws do not stand alone, and the previous next concept is crazy. That is not the primary way by which laws are related. They're related by, as we looked at a few slides ago, at all of the ways that you can connect laws. There are many ways that they're linked together. Often they have nothing to do with, in the case of Virginia, the title, chapter, part breakdown. Yeah, that's an okay way to relate them. But if somebody wants to know what the laws are in Virginia or in where they live, because people don't really think of laws the same hierarchical way that you and I do, of federal laws and state laws versus state regulations and local laws versus local regulations. If they want to know something like about driving on highway, they have a question about what the law is pertaining to something in transportation. Where do they look? Because I can think of 3 titles that might be appropriate and a bunch of chapters that might be appropriate, and that's just the state code. there are much more meaningful ways to relate this information together. We know how to do this. When you're looking at a product on Amazon and it recommends other related products, those are generally pretty good because they do things like look at traffic patterns. When you go and you search for something and you look at 10 different products, it remembers which 10 you looked at and what other people who looked at those also tend to look at in that same session. There's a lot of information like that to figure out what's related. That's not being done in the legal profession. There's no concept that that's how you can take these huge amounts of data and techniques like that and figure out how to relate them in a more useful way. And the great thing about this is if you're thinking, yeah, but how would you make it easy for somebody looking at one law to connect it to, a web of other laws in a way that you would link or perhaps hyperlink them together? The World Wide Web was made for this. And that's not figuratively. Literally, when Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web, he was thinking of how you can take complicated documents and structure them well and link them together when they have related material. This is ideal for legal texts, and yet when we looked at those legal texts that are provided online, they're terrible and they don't do that. I can't say in any way because some of them link the section numbers, but my God, that's really scraping the bottom of the barrel. The final point in humane code display is that other people are smarter than you, and you have to plan on that. And what I mean by that is actually a pretty important concept. Some states, because most of my work has been on the state level, so I'll focus on that here. Some states have had the good sense to, in addition, putting up their ugly website, and they're all ugly. There is no good example. I can't point you to a single state code website and say, they've done a pretty good job there. They're all awful. But some of them, New Jersey's a good example. I stumbled across this a couple days ago. They have, in addition to their hideous website that you can browse, they have a single file, updated nightly. It's a 30 meg zip file, I think. That has the entire, all of the laws of New Jersey, general statutes, or whatever they call them there, where you can download it and have all of the laws at once. Now, this file is not pretty, but it's there. And that means that somebody in New Jersey, or somebody outside of New Jersey, a company like Fastcase, for instance, the DC startup competitor, well, it's been like 15 years, but let's go with upstart competitor to Wexus, etc., can take that data and pop up a website with much more useful information. They can provide that interconnectedness. They can create fansofnjlaws.org if they want to. And I have been contacted by a couple of people in New Jersey who are interested in setting up websites using this data, because it's available. And if it's not available, if you can't get that big file like that, then if there are people smarter than you, say if you work for New Jersey, they don't have the ability, or at least it's very difficult for them, to set up a website using those laws that is better than what you have. So I guess the simplest way to put this is that by providing raw legal data, you allow other people to do things more interesting with that information than you can. And one of those people who's smarter than you is you in the future. If you build, as many of these states have and as many localities have, if they build legal websites in which everything just exists, example, so I'm talking to the guy at the conference in Puerto Rico of legal people who work for states who are in charge of legal codes. And the guy who's in charge for Idaho's regulations. Now, I'm giving a presentation like this, and at the end I ask him, tell me about how you manage your regulations. And the guy from Idaho says, well, I think I do it like a lot of people. When a regulation is changed, I open up my copy of Adobe PageMill, and I find the regulation that's changed, and I keep a copy on my desk, and I type the changes in, and I hit save. That's insane. That's really crazy. And in 1993, that was probably wildly innovative and good for them. And this probably describes most legal code websites, but they haven't done anything since then. So if they had planned properly back then, if they'd said, let's store our laws as XML on the website, and then write a little bit of code that will convert that into HTML, then future them would be much happier. Because now if they want to take their terrible website and turn it into a good one, first they have to figure out how to take tens of thousands of HTML files and turn them into JSON or XML or some useful machine-readable language. So what happens is that can gets kicked down the road year after year because nobody wants to do that. Smarter them today, as opposed to them in 15, 20 years ago, would really benefit from that. So one of the smarter people is you. So plan on being smarter and wanting to do more with data and provide it in a flexible format in the first place when it's created. One of the reasons why providing state legal codes I think is particularly important, providing them online as that machine-readable data, as not just a pretty website, but as that raw data, is because we're missing a link in the flow of open data. There's a lot of focus on that upper right-hand quadrant. People in the world of open government data really care about campaign finance records and election results and legislation and lobbyist filings. And you can connect them. There are plenty of websites like Open Secrets and things like this where they actually use software to connect the dots to say, this legislator received money from this person who was with this organization and then introduced this budget amendment that provided funding to that organization, and we can see that they were lobbied by somebody representing that organization, and that resulted in this legislation which passed. We can connect those dots, and that's really powerful. It can lead to some mistakes because, correlation is not causation, but it's really important people have access to that information. We also have, and there's a lot of examples of this, but the three I've used here are things like Attorney General's opinions, scholarly publications, and court rulings. We can't connect those back to this upper right quadrant without state laws. People might be really excited about HB1. People remember HB1 because that might have been the rallying call in their group, like fight HB1 or support HB1. But if they want to know whatever happened to HB1, did the court rule on it? Well, first you've got to figure out what HB1 was called, when it passed, which sections of the code amended it, then figure out how to search court decisions. Because the court is not going to call that HB1. That will not be mentioned in their decision. That's not how they work. You have to be able to automatically connect that HB1 became 18.2-205, which was then cited in these court opinions. And the ability to make those connections, that really expands the universe of open data and the ability to connect that information together in a meaningful way that is so helpful to people. So you'll remember this. This is back to the Virginia Open Meetings Law. This law, you could look at it like this, or using just the data available in the U.S. Code, or the Code of Virginia, it can look like this. This is the same information as displayed on the State Decoded, the project that I run, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But just displayed much more nicely, using useful information found in that code as we saw mapped 50 minutes ago when I was showing you all the red boxes around things. This is a whole lot nicer looking. So just a few little things that are done in this that are really helpful. One is, and this is tiny, but my God, it helps, indenting text. When you have subsections, it's pretty easy to get lost and figure out, wait, is this a child of the last one? Is this new? Is this part of the subsection that I thought that I was reading? Doing the tiny little thing of indenting subsections, good Lord, it's such, for anybody like, I expect most of us who spends a lot of time reading through laws, it's so nice. This is not hard. This is really very easy stuff. I also embed definitions. So part of what my software does is it identifies every term and definition in legal codes. As you all know, but most people don't know, the implicit glossary that comprises legal codes is so important. If you don't know what the legal definition of a term is, you have no idea what the law is. And so the example that I often give here is that y'all can imagine a law that says you can't play loud music downtown late at night on weeknights. Now, for an average person reading that law, they might think they understand it. They don't, because what's music? What's loud? What's late at night? What's a weeknight? And what are the boundaries of downtown? And if you don't know these 5 things, you know nothing. But how do you know where those are defined, or that they're defined at all? Downtown might be defined in whatever the title is for towns, counties, and cities, or whatever that title is called. The definition of that in the chapter dedicated to Lexington, where it's established what the definition of downtown is. The definition of loud and the definition of music might exist in 2 other completely different parts of the code. How would you ever identify this? The simple answer is you don't. You have to hire an attorney who, I don't know how the hell they do it either, but luckily it's not my problem. That's an incredibly complicated task that is made way simpler with what the State Decoded does, which is that this software trawls through all of the laws and finds every term
and its definition and builds up a database. So for Virginia, I think we're up to something like 15,000 terms extracted. And for each of those terms, it identifies the scope. Does it apply to this section, this part, this chapter, or this title? And for every law, it gets a listing of the entire universe of available vocabulary to it, uses the most specific definition, identifies every term in that law that has a definition. When you pass your mouse over it, you get the definition. It's a very simple thing, but it is awfully helpful. And so something that Eric and I started working on a couple weeks ago, and he's done all of the work on, is using the same concept to assemble a non-copyrighted legal dictionary of probably the couple of thousand most common legal terms that anybody can use on any website with legal terminology, as they're already using on Scout, their service at Sunlight Foundation, so that you can, on your website, immediately give people access to generic legal terms. It's not quite the same as having the very specific term defined in the code, but my God, that's an awfully big help for people to be able to understand legal information. So it's a good concept, and it's being applied more broadly. Something else that the State Decoded does is any cross-reference. It's not just linked, but if you pass your mouse over, it tells you what it's a cross-reference to. And so in the case of Virginia, you get the title of the chapter and the section, which is so much more helpful, because otherwise you would have to, if the link's even there, follow a link, see what it is, go back, and in this case, you can see the series of cross-references, remember what they were, and figure out what they apply to. This is not fun. Something else that the software does is, you can see the URL up top, vacode.org/18.2-487. For those of us who need to look up laws a lot based on the section number, this is so much faster. The URL is command line. You just need to type in vacode.org if that's what you're looking for, or if you want to look at the Florida site, that's sunshinestatutes.com, or we're setting up sites for cities and states across the country. For those of us who use sites like this a lot, it's just a huge time saver and a nice little quality of life improvement. Also provided is bulk downloads. From whatever data is used to pop up the website, there's JSON, there's plain text, XML, SGML, I think we're working on a couple of forms. Oh, we're also going to have PDF, Word, RTF. So you can get the whole code or titles or chapters quickly and easily to be able to browse the whole thing yourself, put it on your iPhone, load it into your ebook reader or EPUB. That's another format we'll provide. It just makes it easier for people who are smarter than me to do more interesting things with this information. The site is also completely responsive. Any website that you set up with the software, this is what it looks like if you browse it on an iPhone. And if we go back, this is what it looks like on a moderately wide screen, like a tablet. And look at the change in the header if I go back and forth here. This is what it looks like on a very big screen. So as you use different devices, it just looks good. There's no need for an iPhone app. Already the website looks and functions like an iPhone app if you're using it on a small device like that. Also, and I apologize to those of y'all for whom this is Greek, all of the information on the website can be browsed by software, which is to say a remote service can connect to, say, Code of Virginia and say, hey, can you please give me a listing of the main titles of the code? And it returns this. Oh, I'm sorry, this is somebody asking for 18.2, the crimes and offenses generally. So it gives you information about 18.2, and then every chapter in order with the URL, its identifier, the name, the type of data it is, the site's internal ID for it, and the URL to connect to it. Which means that somebody using only the own software they've written can use as a database a State Decoded website to power their own website. It's a way, it's much like bulk downloads, it's updated more quickly and it's a lot easier for some people to work with. This is what a law looks like, 18.2-101. This is the very information that when we looked at the pre-booking law, this is the information that powers that, but it's also available in the background for anybody who wants that raw data. This is the dictionary. This is if somebody were to issue a query to the site saying, give me a listing of all definitions of person. Well, there's 167 in the Code of Virginia, and this is all of them. And so you could go through and see, this, let's see, so the first one, person means any individual, corporation, trust, association, partnership, limited liability company, organization, or entity. It applies only to this section, 38-2-3407.12. That's it. That's the only place
where that one applies. The next one is only section, section, section. Yeah, so a lot of them are applied just for one law. Some of them are defined, there's one time it's defined as the whole code. Somebody wants to have this information, they can have it. All of this software is being developed in the open on GitHub, which Eric, you talked about GitHub some, great, I won't repeat that. All of this work has been going on GitHub in totality since March of last year, funded by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. They provided a $165,000 grant to take what I had written for the Code of Virginia and abstract it to work for any legal code. So a year and a half later, we're just about to release version 1.0 and declare this software finished. It's been my full-time job all along. And all the way through, this software has been developed on GitHub, which means we've had a lot of people just show up and make improvements and go away. It's like, you know, your car breaking down and somebody just shows up by the side of the road, fixes it, and drives off. Who was that masked man? There's a lot of that when you develop on GitHub. What this development model has enabled us to do is get quick feedback from people trying out the software as well. The effect of this is that to set up a State Decoded website, all that you need to do is have some sort of that bulk file. You know, you need to have a big XML file basically of your legal code. Once you have that, you download the software and put it up on your web server, and in the appointed directory, you copy that legal code in, and then you load the site in your web browser, and it'll say, do you want to import these laws? And you'll say yes. And it takes about 10 minutes to crank through it and do everything that we've seen here. That's all automated. And when it's finished, it also indexes it with the Apache Solr search engine, which is just as good as Google. It's a very powerful search system that helps you find the website. And it's done. You have a completed website with the bulk downloads, with the API, with the nicely browsable data, all of that. It's increasingly trivial to set up, and it should be pretty close to trivial when we're done with it in just a few weeks, which is great because my grandmother's about to run up. So I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. But the good news is, because of the level of community support that this has gotten, the project will continue. Also, because on GitHub, it's possible for others to continue the project, because so many people are starting to use it that they need it to be better. You know, they're going to need changes that apply to them, and it will be good for others. It's also gotten some surprising support. Representative Darrell Issa, conservative Republican from San Diego area. Darrell Issa started a nonprofit called the Open Gov Foundation. And they've made the core part of their work taking the State Decoded and setting it up for cities and states across the country. So in just the past 6 weeks, 2 months maybe, they've set up websites, I'm not going to think of all of them, but for Baltimore and for Maryland, for Chicago, San Francisco, I can't even remember where else. And they're working on a bunch of others as well. And they work on all of these on GitHub as well. So after they set this up, if somebody from San Francisco says, I have an idea, wouldn't it be great if we could tie into this that you could see in the sidebar a listing of all of the bills that were passed by the San Francisco City Council that proposed to amend this law, and they can add that in, which is, by the way, one of the features of the State Decoded that you can do that. When you look at Virginia Decoded, if you go to vacode.org, when you look at laws, you can see all of the bills that propose to amend that law since, I think, 2005, I think is how far back I can go, 2004 maybe. You can see all of the court decisions that have cited that in their decisions. And for both of those, you can see summaries. You know, did the bill pass or not? What is the summary of that court decision? Because God love them, Virginia's court system provides on the website summaries of court decisions. Nobody does that, so that's awfully helpful. We also use GitHub for issue tracking. So I just want to give you a glimpse of this. So anybody can propose a change, whether it be a feature or a bug. And so we can see I'm responsible for about half or 2/3 of these. There's somebody who's setting up LA's code just for fun. He's a hobbyist who, as he's doing it, he's found a couple of problems. And so sometimes I show up and fix them. Sometimes somebody else shows up and fixes them, which is a little magical. It's a wonderful way to work. Often when I file an issue that I intend to fix, somebody will show up and fix it before I can, which is an awfully nice way to finish your day. Part of the work that I do as well is, as I've gone along, I've found small components of the website that seem to be, or the overall software, that seem to be useful if they had standalone. So one of them, for instance, is just called subsection identifier.
if you have just a body of text taken out of Word of a law, and you want to identify in machine-readable language, okay, so what is each subsection, where does it start and end, and what is its label, and what is it nested under? So to know that section A1 is a child of section A. This is useful information when making this information machine-readable, and so this is a bit of software that existed in the State Decoded that I pulled out to stand on its own, so if anybody has theoretically structured text, or they want to turn into actually machine-readable structured text, they can run that. I also built an interface for a great website called lawhelp.org. I think that's Pro Bono Net is behind that, where they have legal texts available, self-help legal texts, and categorized, so that, and it's provided by legal aid societies around the country, grouped by state. So the idea behind the service they run, and it's just great, is software can query their service and say, hey, do you have anything about landlord-tenant disputes? And they'll say, yes, we have 6 documents. And the first one is from the landlord's perspective, and it's what to do if you have a tenant who has damaged an apartment. And here's a 6-line summary of it, and we have it available as a Word file, as a PDF, or here's a link where they can read it on the web. So the idea is that not only is that useful on its own, I think for a lot of people to write software to make that easy to integrate that into a website, but people can also integrate that into the State Decoded, so that if you're looking in San Francisco, if you're looking at a law about what to do if you're losing your house, you're really screwed if you are looking at a law on San Francisco's website about what to do if you're losing your house. Like, that's not Google time. That's time to get an attorney. So if you're having to Google it, clearly you are in a very dark place and you need help. So what this integration does is it would mean that should they choose to enable this feature in San Francisco, that a banner could come up on the page saying, hey, you should know that open right now, and this is provided by a lawhelp.org system, open right now is a legal aid clinic that would be happy to help you. Here's the toll-free number. If you call it, it will route you to the one closest to you. They're open now and they'd like you to call. And this, by the way, was a lesson for me. My assumption, because I talked to some friends of mine in the pro bono, more specifically legal aid world, and I said, yeah, I'd like to provide more self-help documents so that people don't have to call you. And he said, no, that's a terrible idea. We need people to call us sooner. They wait too long. And what was a small problem becomes a really big problem. We want you to put prominently phone numbers up there so that people will call us quickly. If they won't call us, then show them the self-help documents. And so that seems like a pretty great setup that I hope people are willing to use. To say, I mean, of course, it doesn't apply to the whole code. Like if you're looking at the title of the Code of Virginia that applies to aviation regulations, pretty sure there's no free legal service available to you. But there are entire titles and chapters that, like, you really probably need some help if you're looking at these. So through the great work done by the folks at lawhelp.org, we can give them that toll-free number. We can tell them if it's open right now. We can give them an email address if that's something we're comfortable with. And then as a fallback, we can list those 6 documents. And we can say they're available in Spanish and these things. Really great service, and so I'm really happy to have extracted that bit of software that we wrote so that it's easier for people to integrate that service into their own website. So there's a bunch of these that we've extracted out and that I hope will be more useful to people as a result. And the other idea here, too, is it was possible that this project was going to fail. Like a year ago, when nobody had actually used it for anything yet other than the Code of Virginia site, it was possible that nobody would ever use it and I would do a terrible job. But at a minimum, if I could take components of it that are useful on their own, then perhaps those could succeed with the entire project to fail. Happily, that has proven not to be the case, but in addition, though, there are these little services. So, because for reason of configuration, I had to get this whole talk without my presenter's notes, which, God, I need so much. Here's the part where you ask me questions about, how come you never explained that thing? Or, what's your deal? This is crazy, or whatever. But I will tell you at the outset, when I planned on doing this, I heard from a lot of people, particularly people in the legal informatics community, which I didn't know was a thing before this, who would say, this is not going to work. It's just not. And they had a lot of very good ideas, reasons why it's not going to work. And they're right. There are ways in which this is not perfect, and I'm totally cool with that. Everything that I've done here is really obvious. It is blindingly obvious. I'm not the first person, I'm not the 10th or the 100th person to think of any of these things. But the problem with many of them is that there was some way in which they weren't perfect. Like there are some definitions in some codes that were written by legislators in a format totally different than all the other definitions in that legal code. So what if those aren't included? Well, so what if they're not included? We got 99.9% of them. That's great. Many people would say, no, it has to be perfect. Well, that's fine. Then write your own service, or don't have one at all, which has been the result. I'm very happy to have something that is damn near perfect, and that's a whole lot better than what we saw at the outset with those existing legal code websites. I would be very happy, though, to hear about additional ways in which you think that this is insufficiently perfect, particularly because you have some ideas of how to fix it. I am also hoping that some of you all are thinking about ways in which you might be able to use this for something, because it is really crazy that the very best version of the Code of Virginia that you can find is on a website run by just this guy. I haven't been to law school. I've been turned down by some of the finest colleges in the nation, including the one in which we're standing for undergrad. I never even got a response. That was the crazy thing. I sent the whole application and I never heard anything. That is really, that stung a bit. I was used to rejection, but not being ignored. I lack really any of the qualifications one would really expect to put together something like this. So I'd be very happy to hear about all of the ways in which this is a bad idea, or the ways in which this might be useful to you.
Can I just say something?
Oh, you're welcome.
For the definitions part specifically, because you said, I don't know how attorneys do it, well, I'm pretty sure you know that other people all are going to do this. I need to find the definition of this stupid, vague term, and wasting our time going back and forth. Is it really back out of that?
So have I got something for you?
Is it judicially defined?
This bulk download, in fact, I'll go back even farther, where you can download, you see the bottom one, dictionary is JSON. Here's my proposal. Somebody, and surely there's somebody at law school who can do this, could write a very simple interface that would use that data so that you can have, just on your computer, a web page that just lives on your desktop that allows you to search it. So if somebody says, what does this mean? You can just type it right in, and all that program does, and this would be like an hour's work, all that program does is lets you browse that dictionary.
Yeah, I don't think that's This is like the bane of my existence.
I'm glad I can help. I'll just leave that up so it's something to look at. What else? What's crazy? What didn't make any sense? This is so coherent that there's nothing possibly. All right, here's a tough one. I hope.
What's next, Waldo?
I haven't announced this yet, and hopefully nobody will be seeing the video for a few days, but I have just received startup funding from the Jonathan James Online Foundation to establish the United States Open Data Institute. I used to work for the White House for the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and they have encouraged me to establish an organization dedicated to do this sort of work, working with governments at all levels to figure out what data assets that they have that are not adequately available to people, especially ones that are of value. So the two best examples of this to make sense of it is weather data is the prototypical example. Ever since the late 1960s, when the U.S. Army was put in charge of the weather system, because they were the ones that had to act together enough out of all government agencies to actually record weather data in a meaningful way and transmit it reliably. Up until now, we've seen that weather data has been really useful for commerce and for knowing whether to carry an umbrella. In the 1970s, they opened up electronic data for that, and now we check my phone here to see for sure. I have 6 weather apps on my phone, one of which exists only to tell me if where I'm standing right now it's going to be raining in the next 10 minutes. That's all it does. You're going outside, or if you're outside now, you might want to go inside. We have a huge economy built up on weather data. Obviously for shipping, maritime shipping is a big one. It's crucial. But places like the Weather Channel, there's not like Weather Channel satellite. Like all of that weather data comes from raw data that is provided in real time by the federal government to all of our enormous benefit. A GPS system as well. And of course, that was for the military, and under executive order by President Bill Clinton, the GPS data was opened up so that anybody could buy a GPS receiver. And obviously, my phone is full of apps that are completely dependent on my phone knowing exactly where I am at all times. That's how I got here. I didn't go to AAA and get a trip tech before I came here.
Like I got in my car, drove halfway here, I thought, oh, I know how to get to Lexington, but then what? And it was a decision, do I use my car's GPS or my phone's GPS? And which one? Do I use Google Maps or do I use Apple Maps? Google Maps is better with campuses, I'll go with that. That's amazing that I have that sort of choice with this thing in my pocket. And that's because we have this huge, many multi-billion, I think it's $20 billion industry now, built up annually on GPS data. There are many more of these. Legal information is obviously a pretty big one. The legal service in the U.S. is an enormous sector. I don't propose to replace the entire legal sector with websites or with bulk data, but there is a lot of that information that can be used for real value to public, as we've seen here. That if you can get that raw legal data, that it becomes easy to set up. I mean, easy in the scale of the budget for healthcare at .gov, say, versus my budget for this project. In that scale, it becomes easy to establish websites and provide information that's much more useful than government is or perhaps can. I'm willing to accept a certain tolerance that maybe one out of every 10,000 definitions won't show up when it should. But for a state legislature, they might have no appetite for the possibility that there could ever be a mistake. So there are ways in which the private sector can do things with data that government doesn't necessarily have the appetite for. As I found alarmingly in working in open data at the White House, that you can't get anything wrong. A bunch of my work was with campaign finance data, and some of my data was filings with Congress too. And if I had gotten it wrong, if I had said that a senator got a congressman from somebody she didn't get that money from, depending on who that donation was claimed to come from, that's not just like me being fired, that's congressional hearings. So there's a lot of reasons why making public data available more broadly to the private sector is really important. And so my hope is to spend the next few years preaching that gospel to various governments and connecting the right people to the right software. You all didn't know about the State Decoded, and probably didn't know about VACode.org. Now you do. I want to go around making sure that people know about the many services like this and connecting the great work of groups like the Semi Foundation, Eric's work there, with people who aren't aware of them but who should be. I'll basically be playing matchmaker for a few years. So that's what I'm doing next. So we'll be announcing that. I think the press release goes out from the White House, et cetera, on Monday, and then Tuesday we have a big event for it. I ain't going anywhere. No, I'm from Charlottesville. I'm dying in Charlottesville. I'm not going anywhere. So, well, I take the train is my system. God bless Amtrak. But we'll have employees scattered around the country too. In part because there's, I think, a mistaken belief, at least in government in D.C., that government is in D.C. A minority of government in D.C. is in D.C. Most government is scattered across our country. And a lot of the important work relating to governance and policy is happening at events like this. And most of these events don't happen in D.C. They happen in things like law libraries in Virginia. So, no, I will not be moving. But I might be traveling a lot. I am, the only website that I run is the Virginia one, because it's fun. I would be very happy for some law library to take my software and set up their own website and compete with me, and I can stop running the site. But the rest of the websites, I have not set up a one of them. I released the software for others to establish the websites. So some websites receive, there's a few state governments and city governments who want to use the software. That's great. In other places, we're seeing interest groups like the Waldo Jaquith Foundation set up these websites. In others, it's hobbyists. The LA Code site is just a guy who lives in LA, who's a lawyer and a programmer, and wants to set up a website for it. And I think in others, we'll see businesses. You can imagine a law firm, particularly one of the more ambulance chasing law firms, thinking, great, we'll put the whole code up online, we'll plaster it in tabs for our various DUI services and so on, and we'll attract a lot of traffic and provide useful services. Some people might just want to Google that. The only danger that I foresee is if people set up these websites and stop operating. Now, there are plenty. If you Google for legal code and a particular citation, you've probably seen that there are a bunch of websites out there that put legal codes online. They're all just as bad as the original, and often they're years old. So this would hardly be a new problem. But there's nothing I can do about it. I can make somebody, I mean, no more than Microsoft can make somebody use their copy of Microsoft Word to update it's not really my power. I do foresee myself nagging some people. Dude, you're making me look bad here. Come on, take down your website or update it. What's the deal? Maybe, I don't know. It's up for each individual to determine what the behavior is important. And I could rewrite that tomorrow or next week. I mean, that doesn't ship with the website. No, I think I might include that as the default and tell people about the invasion. You might want to update that. Yeah, I'm not aware. Oh, I do. Yeah, it's farther down the page, but every single law links to its master copy on the official website. That's up to the person implementing the website to write the bit of code that says, here's where the section number goes and going and put a link out there. We send people directly to that so that people will be able to verify it directly. What would be wonderful, but no legal code supports, is if they had an API, it would be really great to be able to give somebody like a verify button. They would download the copy of the text, compare it to our copy of the text, and say, like, yep, 100% match. That would be amazing. And it would always be 100%, but it would make people feel better. But unfortunately, there's no legislature that provides that functionality. The disclaimer at the footer is even better. I forget. I'm not your attorney. I'm not an attorney at all. I don't know why you trust me. It's only pretend you are. But I'm doing my best here, but just understand, like, I'm not giving you any legal advice because, again, I am not an attorney. Now, again, that's not what ships on the default software, but that's what I want to make clear to people on the Virginia site. And that seems to me like another pretty good reason why somebody more competent than me ought to run a site for Virginia. Or there could be like 20 sites in Virginia. Like, right? Why the monopoly? What the heck? Maybe everybody has their own spin to put on a website like that. Yeah. I started on that 2 weeks ago. I want to start off by saying that my interactions with, and I use the term in the kindest possible way, with the bureaucrats in the state government have been wonderful. I have, in various capacities for almost a decade now, worked with particularly the staff of the State Board of Elections and the Department of Legislative Development Services at the legislature. And they're great. They're dedicated, capable, smart people doing the best they can with very limited resources. So with that in mind, I had actually contacted somebody else I worked with there before. Must have been June or July. June, yeah. I'd emailed and said, hey, so I would like to set up a copy of Virginia Decoded, but for regulations. Can I have a copy, do you have some sort of bulk data to regulations? Also, I would need some way to get updates. So do you have any bulk data for what's being published in the register and then for the changes themselves? And like 30 minutes later, I got a phone call from them saying, that sounds great. Yes. Okay. So we have XML, and it's only internal XML, but yeah, we can just put it up on the FTP site and you can download it. Oh, and the regulations. Yeah, okay. So we could write an RSS feed or maybe just push it as JSON. I don't know. What do you want? It's like, anything. This is amazing. It's like, okay, it's Wednesday. Is Friday okay? Yeah, I'm at a conference now, but sure, I'll on the train on the way home. I'll work on it. And maybe an hour later, I get a phone call from Mr. Jaquith. This is Mr. Smith. We spoke earlier here in reference to your query about the regulations. After a conference with my manager here, we have some liability concerns. We need to have some internal discussions, maybe take this up to the head of the agency. It'll be a few weeks. If you want to issue a formal FOIA request, you're welcome to, but we're going to have to delay it for a while. That was in June. It's the right people want to do the right work, and they have the ability, and they know it's important, and unfortunately, they're frequently held back by fear. And it's fear of the unknown. They don't know what I'm going to do with it. Well, it's none of their business what I'm going to do with it, but they don't know how to do it, so it's easier to say, and then we'll get back to you. So I started a couple weeks. I was at the beach for a couple weeks working, but it eliminated an hour's commute time every day, so it gave me a bit of time to write some code. And I wrote a scraper that's up on GitHub to connect to the state regulation website And a scraper, can you explain a scraper at all?
It's a reverse of
Okay, there you go. So you can imagine that you could load every single regulation on the state's website and one by one copy the text out and paste it into a document. A scraper is software that does it automatically. So it just connects to every single page one by one, copies out the content, tries to structure it in some way the software can use and stores it. So I have a scraper that's about 99% done for the state regulations. And once I had it, it's scraping it out and storing it in State Decoded format. And once that's done, it'll take 15 minutes to pop up a new website using those regulations. The trick is, if they had a bulk download, I would just download that file every day or two or whatever. But instead, I have to load, I think it's like 30,000 pages on their website every day. This is crazy. Like this is a waste of their resources. It's a really, and these are not static files, the HTML files that are just copying files. This is running through a database and a piece of software. Like this is abusing their server, and I don't want to. And when I called, I said, like, I can just scrape it, but I'd rather have bulk data, and that's when I got really excited. It's a shame. Now, on the other hand, I've been working for a few months with, this isn't what you asked about, but I think it's also illustrative. I've been working with the head of the Virginia Department of Health's, I forget what they call it, their food safety division that inspects restaurants. I've said I would love to get bulk data of your restaurant inspections updated as often as you give them to me. So that, anybody ever tried to look up a health inspection for a Virginia restaurant? It's on a Canadian website, healthspace.ca, that is not indexed by Google. Good luck finding it. This is not a good way to do it. So I want to take the same data, just quickly set up a new website, mirroring the data. And I've also been talking with a guy I know, Luther Lowe, who's the head of government relations for Yelp. And they're going to import that data into Yelp. So that when you use they all haven't used it, it's a great service for looking at iPhone or available desktop or whatever, to look at reviews. Anybody can leave reviews of a business establishment or government agency for that matter. So in addition to knowing that Yelp users have given a restaurant 4.5 stars, I would like to know that the health department gives it 1 star. So they want to do that too. So I just need to get that data. So the health department has been very cooperative. It's slow going for reasons that are not the fault of the guy that I'm working with, despite being the head of that division, but he's plowing ahead, doing all the right things. He got back to me last week, a few months we've been working on this, and said, here's the thing, we're not empowered by the law to just give you data whenever it's updated. We need a FOIA request every time. And before I get frustrated, he said, no, I understand. No, I should say I'm going to find somebody to introduce legislation to fix this coming session. But he said, so here's my idea. You could request it in the form of loading a website address, and we would respond to it in the form of giving you that data. And I said, that's a pretty good idea. He said, all right, so we're agreed then, but that's what your FOIA request looks like. And I said, yeah, and I can just write software to automatically load that URL. He's like, yep, great, we're done. To work with their vendor, I love this. So their vendor, the health space folks in Canada, he arranged a phone conference with them about a month ago, or 6 weeks ago, so and I said, so I just need data in whatever format, if it's like a CSV file, like a spreadsheet, I'll take it. I said, well, do you have a database? I said, do I have it? Yes, I have a database. I said, great. What if we just automatically synchronize all the contents of our database with your database every few hours? That'll do. Yeah. So he said, great, just give us the domain name and username and password, and we're done. And like 20 minutes later, like, okay, it's set up. We just need the Virginia Department of Health to give us a thumbs up. So we've been waiting all this time to fake this, I can't say fake, that's not at all fair, to create this FOIA-like process that qualifies under the law by which I can issue a request, which will then cause the database to synchronize. We found this incredibly efficient path, and we had to find a less efficient path to get there. To go back to your question, I'm excited about regulations. And one of the reasons I'm excited about regulations is because I already wrote a year ago at a great event, the Sunlight Foundation Conference, this was in the spring, a scraper for, people can provide public comments on regulations. So I wrote a scraper that connects to that website and downloads every comment that has ever been posted over the past 10 years and updates every day. So imagine that you can look at a law on this site and see which bill it was established by, and then you can see which regulations that enables. You can look at the regulation and see all of the proposals to change that regulation and all of the comments that were made on those proposals. This is pretty great. Now, there's one more step that I've done with the infrastructure for. I just haven't actually copied the video player onto the page. So I run a website called Richmond Sunlight, just as a hobby as I have for years, that takes the General Assembly's website, scrapes all the data onto it, and sets up a way more useful website. So one of the things that I have that I do with that is, as you all might know, the General Assembly refuses to broadcast video of their proceedings. They won't allow it. I think WCVE has gone to them repeatedly and said, we'll set up the equipment, we'll record all of it, you don't have to do anything, and that way people at home can follow along. They will know we have a webcast. It is not very good, but we have a webcast, so they can watch that. No, it'll lead to grandstanding, they claimed. They're way ahead of us on grandstanding. I don't think that would make any difference. Because they do, I found out, record their proceedings. They have an in-house video system, like a closed-circuit video system, which for posterity, they burn live to DVDs. So if the session goes long, they have to take out the DVD and put in another one to get like a gap as the guy changed out the DVDs. And I once spent a few hours sitting in the room with him as he recorded, like talking about how he does it and learning about how the process works. Because I buy those DVDs. They're $10 per DVD, and it costs me $1,000, $1,200 per session, and I raise money on Kickstarter for it. We buy all the DVDs, I take them home, and I rip them one by one and convert them into digital video, and I upload them to my website and to the Internet Archive. And then I do a few things. I use facial recognition to identify who is speaking on the screen at any time. I use voice pitch recognition because everybody's voice tends to stay within a particular range to also figure out who's talking. I'm working with a friend of mine who's a Google engineer, Matt Cutts, who's in charge of all their anti-spam efforts. We also pipe the video through YouTube to get bad transcriptions, but whatever, it's better than nothing. And then finally, when legislators are speaking on screen, there's what's known as a chyron, the graphic on the screen, like you see on the news, identifying the speaker. And in the corner is the bill that they're talking about. So I use optical character recognition to grab every second of video from every day and extract that text. So I know in every second who's speaking, what bill they're speaking about, how long, when they started speaking, when they stopped, and who else spoke about that bill. Here's the fun part. On Richmond Sunlight, on this other website, you can then look at a bill and see that there are 43 video clips about this lasting an hour in all, and you can hit play and see an automated highlight reel of all the time in which that bill is discussed. I carry that through to the Decoded. I just haven't put the video player on there yet because I haven't picked a good one. When you look at a law, it asks Richmond Sunlight, of all the bills that are proposed, for as long as we have video, to amend this law, please give me a playlist of all of the times in which that bill was discussed before the General Assembly. And you can hit play. So if there's any debate about legislative intent, just hit play. I'm also just about finished with bulk data for campaign finance. And all this stuff is on GitHub, so anybody else can contribute to it. So the idea is to be able to connect campaign contributions to election results, to legislation, I have lobbyist filings as well, to lobbyist filings, to law, to court decisions, and also to regulation, to the register for proposed changes, and then all the way down to comments. Now, what people are going to do with this, I don't know. It's not really my thing. I hope it's useful to people. I do all of this, except for the Virginia Decoded. This has all just been a hobby. It's evenings and weekends. And now that I have a 22-month-old, I haven't gotten a lot of work done in about 22 months. At least not like I used to on these things. But that's where I want to go with this. That's what I think needs to happen. And that for me is the vision for open data. That we're trying to assemble this tapestry of data, where right now we just have these standalone bits of information, one URL with one lousy law on it you can't do anything with. That if you can take that and make it part of something much bigger, then somebody looking at that law doesn't have to wonder what it means. It has self-help guides. They can look at the video that was being discussed, which I used in an argument with an attorney yesterday about what to name my new business. She claimed that I couldn't call it Peabody Riggs and Company because my name is neither Peabody nor Riggs. It was an ancestor of mine's business.
because that's illegal. And I was able to show her the video where Joe Johnson patroned the bill and got up on the floor of the General Assembly last year, in the 2012 session, and talked about the purpose of the bill, and that she is wrong and I am right, and I'll name what I want. And she didn't really care, she just wanted to cover her butt, but so it goes. It was the first time that I'd really been a customer of my own data. And it was really helpful, and I thought, this is a great service. It took me a long time to figure that out. But that's what everybody needs to have access to. Not just y'all in your work, where surely it's going to be helpful for things like that, but so that hopefully more people don't even have to come to you, and the questions you get are much more interesting than, can you look this thing up for me because I don't know how to do it. That's boring. And you're smarter than having to do that. So let's get there, and if you guys have any ideas or suggestions for me, you can certainly contact me. Here's URL and email address for the project and for me. I'm always open to suggestions. That's the point of the whole open source model, is that other people know more than I do. Thanks for the time, folks.
So